Everyone, it's April 19th. I don't know how that's possible. I don't know if you're feeling the same. It's just nuts to me. But welcome, because that means it's our April UCCCN meeting, and we're so glad you're here. So we're going to go ahead and get going. We've been talking. There we go. We've been talking a little bit about making some changes to the way we do things to take the most advantage of the time we have together in this virtual format. So we're doing introductions a little differently, and I'll show you that in just a moment, but they used to take a while. We don't want that any longer. We're going to take advantage of that time to do some announcements and updates up front, and then have a little more time around cases. And also looking at resources, and making sure that we highlight some resources each month for you. And then we'll have the remainder of the time for a main presenter or topic. And this time we're doing dyslexia awareness, and we're excited about that. It's something we've never really talked about here. And in our internal planning, we've realized that it doesn't seem like there is a ton known about what the resources and services and supports are around dyslexia. And so we're excited to learn more about that and hope that it'll be beneficial to you. And then we'll get wrapped up by 10. All right, so what we're doing with our introductions to make sure that we know who we are without taking all that time is we're going to utilize Zoom's little profile information. And so if you don't mind going in your profile, if you're able to do that, and there's the 3 little dots there, and you click those dots, and then you'll see some options, including rename. And that would be fantastic if you could put that in your profile so that we can see who you are. If you're on camera, that's even better. But when someone mouses over, then your name and your role and where you work will pop up as well. And Jade, I see that you just put that in the chat. That's also wonderful. So you're welcome to put it in the chat as well. The chat just gets longer as we go through the meeting with more comments in it. And this way, this information will kind of show up for folks and be a little more permanent throughout the meeting. So we appreciate folks doing that. Chat's good too. Chat's great, in fact, because we want to take full advantage of the chat feature with Zoom. All right. So moving right along, let's get into a few announcements and some updates. So we always talk about Pediatric Project Echo, which also happens on Wednesdays. It happens at noon. And so we want to let you know that we had an ECHO presentation on the 5th around pediatric comprehensive care, and it was really good. It was a really well done presentation. We've got the video and the slides linked there for your, if you're interested in taking a look at those. We got to talk a little bit about UCCCN in that meeting, since care coordination is a big part of working with these more medically complex kids, and maybe some of the providers on that call will be interested in having their folks join UCCCN. We hope so. So that was an excellent one. We encourage you to take a look at that. We didn't have a presentation on the 12th, but we do have one today at noon on stroke during infancy. And as always, these are recorded, and we post those slides and the recordings really quite quickly. So they're usually up by the next day. And we encourage you to check out everything that's been going on. There's really been a lot of excellent presentations that you might want to check out. And of course, if you're able to be there in live, we love that too. And this link will go out in the notes, so you'll be able to find that. And if you want it sooner than that, oops, sorry. If you want it sooner than that, you can just email me. Oh, and then let's take a look going forward. We do have, of course, our sub-series of Autism 101. So on the 26th, we'll have a presentation around diagnostic evaluation. I'm sure that'll be excellent. And then in early May, we've got one on transition to adulthood. I'm really looking forward to this one. So these are our MedPeds folks from the University Health Sugar House Clinic who will be presenting, Dr. Molly Deuce and Dr. Kira Watson. All right. Okay, we've got some updates for you around the medical home portal. So we've got a number of updated clinical pages a couple of newborn disorder pages there that have been updated, and maternal-led and childhood-led exposure pages have been updated. And then we have a couple of new things as well. We've got a care process guideline around prenatal urinary tract dilation. And we've got a new clinical module, suicidality and self-harm. It's just been published. And I haven't had a chance to take a close look at it, but I understand that it's really well done. So we'll make sure that that's linked and sent out in our meeting updates as well. We encourage you to take a look at it. I think it should be a very good, unfortunately, very good and helpful module for everyone. Okay, another big update. Ooh, we have been working on a redesign of the Medical Home Portal website for a while now, and our go live date is Thursday, April 20th. Oh, hey, that's tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow. So we've got a lot going on at the Medical Home Portal right now. We're juggling a few balls, and we're really excited about this. So check it out, and know that when you do come and take a look at those clinically updated pages or any of our service provider links or the list of service providers that we'll send out from this meeting, you'll be looking at an updated, redesigned live site. So we're excited about that. We also hope you'll be a little patient with us because we'll have a few kinks to work out as it goes live. Not everything will be quite perfect, and we'll work through those. And if you want to let us know what you're seeing that seems a little bit not right, we love that too. We appreciate that. So thank you. Okay, so we had put out a survey and asked for your input about making some changes to UCCCN. And we got some comments from our Zoom last month, and then we got some comments from an emailed version of that survey as well. We didn't get a ton from the emailed version, but we're going with what we got. And with all of that redesign effort, we haven't had a chance to put the survey results into kind of a nice visual summary. So I'm just doing a quick and dirty summary to let you know that what we learned was really quite interesting to us. So the majority of respondents said our 8:30 start time is just fine. And perhaps that's because we've been doing this for 8 years at 8:30, and it's on people's calendars, and that's great. So we'll keep the 8:30 start time. And we asked about reducing the length, wondering if that was something that was a problem for people. And generally speaking, we were told that 90 minutes was fine. So again, we'll go ahead and keep the 90-minute length. If this, seems like it's not working out in the future, we can always come back and revisit that. We're going to definitely ask for your feedback more often going forward. And know that you don't have to wait for us to ask either. We love to hear what you have to say. Then sort of one of the main questions had to do with, okay, what do we do with the time that we have? And we did hear that the idea of focusing a little bit more on case presentations was welcomed. And also these resources, whether they're new or just new to you, that's something that people wanted. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to shift the way we use our time just a little bit. We're going to focus more on case presentations, and we're going to make sure that we spotlight, highlight some resources for you, particularly if they're new and they're just kind of coming on. So we're excited about that. Okay, Gwen, sorry, go ahead and try rejoining. Sorry that you're not able to hear. So that's what's going to be happening. And it's kind of funny. I've always been such a fan of the quality improvement PDSA cycle idea. So that's just what we're going to do. We're going to kind of apply a PDSA approach to this. If something doesn't seem like it's working quite right, we're going to evaluate that. We'll tweak it, and we'll keep trying to make it better. And that's our goal, is we want this time to be most valuable for you. All right. So with that, we'll move into our brainstorming time. So this is where we talk about cases, and probably in the coming weeks, we'll redo these slides just a little bit to reflect some of this new approach. But for right now, we'll go ahead and dive into cases. And oh, let me back up just a little bit. I apologize. So one of the things that we will plan to do, and we will be sending out this information as part of the meeting summary and possibly an email separate from that as well. In terms of the case presentations, the way that we want to make that happen is to ask for your help with those. And rather than just hoping that you come to a meeting ready to share a case, we're going to ask to have folks sign up ahead of time. And I think we'll have a maximum of 2 cases per meeting. And 1 is also okay. There's not going to be a lot of pressure associated with this, and not a lot of formality either. The most important thing, of course, is no PHI. But we do appreciate having, good details that will help to get conversation going, to stimulate that brainstorming, that crowdsourcing kind of a thing. And they don't have to be cases that need to be quote unquote solved either. They can be something that happened a while before. They can be an update on something. All of those kinds of things are great. I think it's very helpful to have these kinds of cases for those folks who maybe they've got something similar that they're going to be focused on in the near future, and understanding how somebody else approached it could be incredibly helpful. At any rate, that's what we'd like to do. And so that form for signing up and a little bit more information about how we're going to do this will be coming out forthwith. All right. Now we're going to move ahead. Okay, so we're going to do things a little bit differently today, and I'm going to turn things over to Athena Parker, and I appreciate her doing things today while we're making this shift, and also trying to take advantage of y'all and let you know about some other things that the Medical Home Portal team is working on. So Athena.
Great. If you'll just let me share my screen.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what you're seeing here is a poster that we prepared for the AMCHIP conference that's coming up, and that's the Association of Maternal and Child Health Programs. What that acronym stands for. There we go. And it's a gathering of people from all across the U.S., typically who work in Title V programs in state health departments, and have concerns for children and youth with special healthcare needs, and programs designed around that. So we wanted to highlight the work that has been happening in Utah in particular, and how our partnerships and collaborations with University of Utah Health, the Health Department, 211, Utah Family Voices, UCCCN, this group, and the Utah Parent Center have helped really bolster the work that the Utah Medical Home Portal has been doing. And to make the poster more exciting, we decided to present a case example as a way to show how the Medical Home Portal could be used as an effective tool in the work of children and youth with special health care needs. So that's going to be our case example for today. And hopefully this print isn't so terribly tiny that you can't read it. But so our case example here, I'll read it out loud in case you are having a hard time seeing it. It says a 17-year-old in Layton, Utah with high functioning autism is seeing their pediatrician. The parents have questions about guardianship and what happens after high school. The patient would like to be independent and get places on their own, and the pediatrician would like to help the family locate an adult medicine provider. So that's a lot to answer in a typical visit, but this is maybe where some of the work is done after with a care coordinator or case manager that could help direct this family in the right direction. So You can see here we have all these QR codes, and you're welcome to go ahead and hold your phone up to those QR codes and see where they take you, but they're to a few different topic pages on the medical home portal that could be shared with families around some of this information, and then also to some service providers as well. So I'll give you just a second to test out the QR codes there, and then I'll show you what these link to. So we wanted to highlight pages that would be specific for both the youth in this case study, the family in general, and particularly the parents here, and then also for the provider here. We wanted to demonstrate how the medical home portal, it really serves everybody who cares for children and youth with special healthcare needs. So for the youth, we wanted to highlight some of our pages around self-advocacy and transportation options for young adults. So I've got to find them up here. So this is our self-advocacy page. So that first QR code links to this page, which provides a lot of really great information. And then at the bottom, it also links to really great resources for the family as well, and some Utah specific ones also. For transportation options, here you have all kinds of information about adapted motor vehicles, adapted driving, public transportation, emergency medical transportation. And in addition, this also provides a link to the service directory for those particular options. So let's say this youth in particular is like, I really want to travel. I want to do some leisure travel. They could use this tool that would take them to the service directory to get information about agencies that specialize in travel. Seems like this autism travel might be a really good option for them. So that is one way that the information kind of links to the services in the portal. Now for the family, parents in particular, they had questions about what happens after high school. So this page would talk the family through all the different options for after high school that they might want to consider and talk about with their child. And again, also links to some really great services, some Utah specific ones here as well: Utah Voc Rehab, Utah Association of Community Services, the SPD Parent Center. They also had questions about guardianship. So again, here's some really great information about guardianship and alternatives to guardianship that they might find really helpful to read through, to look at the resources there. And this also, again, would link to some services in the directory that might be particularly helpful for them. The provider in this case study wanted to help the family find an adult care practice as they start thinking about transitioning. And so we've just shown here how you can search for providers. In this case, I just did a search for med peds physicians, and it brought up all the physicians in the area. We know that this patient was located in Layton, so we might, direct them toward the Farmington Health Center is a good option. If we look at that listing, you can see that there is some information about the meds peds providers that work there. And finally, we wanted to show how somebody could make a custom list out of all this information and resources that they could then send a link to the family or print off if they're still in the office. So this is just a quick list I put together with some of those resources that I showed, or that I just showed on some of those pages around services that this family might really be interested in. So for the transportation, UTA on demand, Guardianship Associates of Utah, there's that link to the Farmington Health Center. I also put the Madsen one in there too, just in case the family's interested in a couple different options. There's a link to Motive Care, who provides non-emergency medical transportation, and then a link to a nationwide self-advocacy support. So this is just an example of kind of how you could collate all of that information in addition to directing families to specific topic pages. So any questions on that? I know that was kind of a lot of information and not a typical case study.
Athena, this is really awesome. Is there any way you can share the original poster on the front that you started with in our email? So we have that. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. I think I can drop it as a link on the meeting invite here. But if not, I did send it to Eric yesterday and he said he was going to send it out to all of his team. So if it doesn't share that way, then.
One thing I realized is that there might be a little bit of a cognitive disconnect if you're looking at this poster and seeing the image in the center of the house. That's what our redesigned website homepage looks like. And we put that in there knowing that we were going live and wanting to make sure we had the right version of the website. So those QR codes will go to the same content in our redesigned site. So no worries there. But yeah, so that's also giving you a little bit of a preview into what our new site sort of looks and feels like. We've gotten some feedback from people who've had a little bit of a preview here and there, that it feels less, Athena, what was the institutional, more family friendly?
Yeah, I think some of the sentiment for the current site is that it tends to look a little textbooky and more clinical, and that this look is a little more warm and friendly and user friendly, maybe, and family friendly. Right.
Okay, so we've got a lot of folks really quite interested in this poster. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and I was gonna try to figure out how to load it as a file here in the chat, but maybe we'll just instead include it as an attachment in the resources that are sent out after the meeting.
Great. Well, I really appreciate you doing that for us today, Athena. And we have a few extra minutes. So before I jump to our next slide in my slide set, if there is anyone who has a case that you'd like to bring up today, we have a couple of minutes and we don't want to take, gloss over that. So if you've got anything that you'd like to bring up, this was a great time. Let me share my screen again. Maybe. I love technology. All right. So that was that case example. Okay, well, if somebody thinks of something and they want to bring it up before we move too far into the rest of our meeting this morning, feel free to pop it in the chat, but I'll just continue for now. So we're going to start trying to highlight some resources just a little bit more. And some of these may be something new that we've learned about since our last meeting. And in today's case, they are. But in other cases, they might be something that we remember and feel like it would be good to let you guys know about again, perhaps. And then, of course, we love it when you all make us aware of new service providers, new resources. And so this would be a great time to hear of anything that you're aware of as well. But for today, wanted to point out a couple of clinics that we have become aware of in the last little bit. Now, you'll see I don't have a lot of information on the first one. We all are pulling that together, and we will make sure that we have that in the Utah Medical Home Portal service directory before we send out the meeting summary, and we'll have a link to the information we know. Both of these clinics are new and don't have a web presence yet, and both are local. So let's see. Let me quickly check and see what I remember about the dysautonomia clinic. I can't say that, guys. I don't know how to say that. But I know that I believe it's University Health related on that one. So we will find out a little bit more information and make sure that you're aware of how to direct families to utilize that clinic if in fact they need it. And okay, Jade, thanks so much. We're so happy to see you for the little bit of time we get. And then this other one is differences in sex development clinic. So this is pretty interesting. And we do have a little bit more information already in our service directory on this one. And it's held at Primary Children's. So it's unfortunately just available quarterly, but it's available, which is, you know, that's what we need. And oops, sorry, let me go back. So yeah, providing outpatient care to newborns with differences in sex development. And we do have some information on the medical home portal about differences in sex development as well, if that turns out to be something that that you're working with. Okay, anybody have any new resources, anything that they're aware of that might have changed or they'd like to mention and bring up?
Mindy?
Yeah.
Hi there.
Hi there.
I'm Maria Soder. I don't know if it's okay, but I'd like to just add my own program as a resource,
Absolutely.
if that's okay.
Yeah.
This is fabulous. I'm so honored to be here today. And we are a social emotional, we're very, very unique preschool serving ages 3, 4, and 5. And we are basically really focusing on social emotional. Most of the children in our program find it difficult to thrive in a typical developing or typical preschool environment. So we're all behavior specialists, trained mental health, special needs, to work with children that are experiencing or having very, very big feelings and having a difficult time to self-regulate. In addition, we work with pediatricians and therapists, and we observe, and the Children's Center as well, we observe children and help sometimes find a diagnosis if we're seeing that the behaviors are, need maybe more support. So we're helping children get diagnosed and, just finding all the resources and support that they need to be successful once they get ready for kindergarten. So I just wanted to say, we're a great resource. I work with pediatricians and, the medical field, and we just we're a very small school. So I just wanted to put that out there. The Sammy Center, we're located in Mill Creek.
That's right. That's right. I remember your email. Thank you very much, Maria. We will make sure that the Sammy Center is specifically mentioned in our meeting summary. We do have that in the medical home portal Utah database. So
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We're glad you joined us. And that kind of reminds me, I put something in the Facebook group, I believe yesterday. I got an email from the Family Support Center that they are fully staffed with clinicians for their mental health services as well. It's always so wonderful to hear about more services in this area because we know what a need there is. So that was really good news as well. So.
Thank you, Mindy. And I want to just say one last thing. I know some of us say post-pandemic, some of us say we're still living in a pandemic. I cannot express to you the lack in social emotional or social skills in this age group, and it's only going to affect them, later as we go on. So it's very important to be proactive now versus reactive later.
Definitely, 100%. And thank you to Donell and Carrie for putting some other links in the chat as well. So if folks want to take a look at those prior to the meeting summary showing up in your inbox, that's great. We appreciate that. Great. All right. Okay. And I know that we have our guest speaker on the call, so I'm excited that we can go ahead and get started a little bit early with her presentation. And so let's see, let me find you. There you are in my list of faces. We're very pleased to have Donell Pons join us today. And Donell, do you have slides that you'd like to show?
Yes, I do. If that's
Fantastic.
possible.
Let me go ahead and stop sharing and allow you to put up your slides.
How's that working?
Yep, I can
Great.
see it.
Great. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you guys today. And then just a quick reminder, how many minutes should I take here?
You're in a good place. It's just a little after 9. And so I feel like if we make sure that we have time for questions, I mean, basically we can go until almost 10. We just want to be cognizant of folks' time and not go
Gotcha.
over. So
Absolutely. Good.
okay.
So I'm just going to present on dyslexia, and really it's kind of an interesting space right now. We have a lot that's happening within the education system in the state of Utah. Across the country, we're having a movement. We'll talk a little bit about that in the presentation. This movement centered around the science of reading. So we're seeing more activity, more understanding, more desire to learn about how children struggle to read and how they do come to read. And what we're finding is we have a push in the education area, but we're really missing that early pediatric area where we could be finding students and helping them to be even better prepared before they hit the school system. And there are things that we can do. So we're hoping to kind of close that gap and make relationships and figure out how we can do that. I am part of a thing called the Utah Literacy Coalition. It's a coalition that's been formed just recently to kind of keep an eye on the various pieces of legislation and conferences and how to help educators get educated and how we can build relationships in the community in Utah. That's one of my roles. And the other is with Decoding Dyslexia Utah, who's been around for quite a while now and has helped put together a lot of the legislation that you see being passed around reading. So kind of two different groups that I bridge there. Just quickly, my story, why it matters. I sit squarely within this whole group. I have 3 members of my family who have dyslexia. I married somebody with dyslexia who had no idea he had dyslexia. He came from a household of folks with dyslexia. None of them knew they had dyslexia. He was attempting to get a degree at the University of Utah when I married him and had dropped out just before we got married. He had been on the dean's list. And I had no idea he was struggling with reading. He never said a word to me. It didn't come up. And then we're skiing at the base of the Tetons on our honeymoon. I had purchased a book earlier in the day to read in the tent. I hand the book off to him to take up some reading duties. He didn't say that would be really hard for me to do. And he attempted to read this text and had no ability to get through it. And I was floored. I had no idea somebody could attend college, let alone be on the dean's list, and really be struggling with basic reading. That led us on a little journey of discovery, very carefully to find out reading's difficult. Why is that difficult? He had no idea. And the word dyslexia had never been used. We still didn't know for years until we went on to have children. And because there's a heritable component, sure enough, out of our 4, we had 2 who would end up struggling with dyslexia. The challenge became there was little to no information at the school. So I was aware of challenges my child was having, but I wasn't finding a way to get information. And later I would find out that there were things I could have been doing. I just didn't know to be doing them as a parent to help my child. So that's why this information is so important, getting it out there and letting folks know what they can do to help. So here's the why does understanding dyslexia matter? Children who don't transition from learning to read and to reading to learn face a lifetime of risks, we know. This is pretty basic information that we're all pretty much aware of, that 70% of those reading below average in 1st grade will still be reading below average in 8th grade. That's a pretty hard and fast number. It doesn't change. And a child who doesn't read is vulnerable to feelings of shame, failure, inadequacy, and depression. And I can verify that that child who doesn't read, who is vulnerable to those feelings, becomes an adult who is vulnerable to those feelings. And that's the population I spend a lot of my day with, are adults who are still working to read, and they are in the workplace. I run a workplace literacy program. 20% of the population struggles with symptoms of dyslexia. We'll talk a little bit about these numbers that come up associated with dyslexia and how we see different numbers depending on who we're looking at and who's talking about it. But 20% is a pretty hard and fast number of folks who are struggling with reading, and it looks like dyslexia. Well, let's see if we can get this to move. So a snapshot of the learning and attention issues in the United States to break down that 20%. We have 1 in 5 of the children in the US who have a learning and attention issue. That's what we're calling it, that 1 in 5, that's that 20%. The largest number that sits in that 1 in 5 is dyslexia. So over here, it has common examples down on the right-hand side of what are those learning and attention issues. A common example is number 1, dyslexia. That's the number 1 reason a child's going to be in that category struggling. They can also have dyscalculia, that's the math challenge. They can also have dysgraphia, which is the handwriting and writing challenge. There can be co-attending or comorbid challenges that go with that, in addition to one of our number 1, ADHD, that co-attends with dyslexia is ADHD. And that often gets overlooked because everybody's paying attention to the struggling with reading. And oftentimes the ADHD piece is overlooked for years until we really advocate hard to get a student to look at that. And then we see that those subset groups of how are people getting helped? If you're identified as those 1 in 5 that need some help because you're struggling with one of these things, there's only a small subset of students who are actually ever going to receive specialized instruction or accommodations. And that breaks that down into those 2 bubbles under the 1 in 5. Just about 1 in 16 students is ever going to receive help with their instruction on an IEP. In fact, most of our students with dyslexia never even hear about getting help or services in school. And then 1 in 50 with accommodations on a 504. Those are becoming far more popular, the 504s, by the way, because they find a little bit easier to get. They don't always accomplish the task of helping a student become a reader, though, is the problem. So then we also want to talk about what does reading look like in the United States. So that 1 in 5 that you talk about, this 20%, help me understand our reading statistics in the United States and how this fits in. We have this thing called the National Assessment of Educational Progress. It's testing that we've, collected data over a lot of time in the United States. We have a lot of data to cultivate. Reading is a stagnant number, as I've said before, for about 30 years. We've sat at the same place with our reading numbers. They're not good. When we pull the pie chart apart, looking at those reading numbers, we know that consistently we have about 35% of the population that can read at what we call a proficient or above level. That would be the level you would need for college or additional schooling if you wanted to go on to a career that required reading. And then 65%, the majority of our kids who are graduating, are sitting at below proficient. They don't all have dyslexia. So what's going on if you're talking a 20% number and I'm looking at 65%, the majority of students who are graduating not being able to, we know that the way that we teach reading is not appropriate. And a lot of our educators are leaving schools of education not understanding how to teach reading. And so we know that there's a further segment of the population that could have used better instruction to become a good reader. They don't necessarily have dyslexia, but they needed better instruction to become a good reader. So that's why that number is so huge when we're talking about students who are not proficient. And then, so that looks at the pie chart down below, that percent who learn to read with little or no explicit instruction. Look how that pretty much mirrors our proficient or above. That's about 40% of our population is going to do okay in a classroom, just fine, maybe figure it out. Maybe they could have been a better reader sooner if they'd received better instruction, but they're going to make it. But that 60%, which mirrors our below proficient, they needed moderate to extensive explicit instruction, much better instruction to become a good reader. So that's how those kind of reading numbers break down. And the term dyslexia, when I'm talking about dyslexia, what is it that I'm talking about? Here's a really good definition. Within the definition, you can oftentimes think of maybe somebody you know that might fit this profile. So dyslexia is a specific learning disability, SLD. That's also the classification in special education. If a student is going to come up with dyslexia, it's usually SLD. That is neurobiological in origin. It is characterized by difficulties with accurate and or fluent word recognition and by poor spelling and decoding abilities. So that doesn't say they can't read. So sometimes I do run across students who simply cannot read. That's true. They have dyslexia. They didn't receive enough help. They have severe dyslexia. They really can't read. But most of the time, somebody who has dyslexia can read. It's not great reading. It's error prone. It's not very, doesn't have fluency or prosody to it. And the comprehension is poor because they're working so hard. So that's something we want to dispel as the myth. These difficulties typically result from a deficit in the phonological component of language. That's the sounds, how we receive and interpret, break apart sounds. That's the foundation to reading. And this is often unexpected in relation to other cognitive abilities in the provision of effective classroom instruction. So this can also happen and occur in a classroom where a student seems to be getting decent instruction in how to learn to read, and they're still not grasping it. The secondary consequences may include problems in reading comprehension and reduced reading experience that can impede growth of vocabulary and background knowledge. So this is just a self-fulfilling prophecy of if I'm not able to accomplish that decoding or basic task, I simply cannot gain those things that I should be gaining from reading, and that is extended vocabulary and background knowledge. So dyslexia is a clinical diagnosis. It's a culmination of findings, and it's not a list of processes. What are some of those findings? A history. So like I explained my history, I definitely fit right into the red flag category in saying that someone in my life struggles with reading. They're an adult, otherwise seem very bright, able to be successful in other areas. Reading is still very, very difficult. That's a red flag. There's a disparity between reading and intelligence. Again, that otherwise bright individual struggling with this thing reading seem to have received adequate instruction like a lot of students around them, still struggling. There's an indication of phonological difficulties, and we'll talk a little bit about more what that looks like. Slow reading with better vocabulary. So their student is able to pick up on vocabulary because of how bright they are. They hear, they listen, they're using their oral as well to pick up on it. And also there are issues with reading comprehension. Observation of spoken language and reading. So you're going to take a look at what the spoken language looks like in addition to looking at the reading. It's watching the student do the things. And this assessment of fluency is critical. How well does this student do these activities? The automaticity to it. So dyslexia in the 21st century, these are the things we want folks to know. In dyslexia, we have the scientific knowledge. We can pinpoint dyslexia very well. We understand it very well. That's what we have gained from the 21st century. We have fMRI studies to be able to examine a brain as a student is reading to see exactly what components of the brain are working. And we can understand what that looks like also in a student who has dyslexia. In dyslexia, the major problem is not a knowledge gap. We have plenty of knowledge, but it's an action gap. That's where we're sitting right now. We have plenty of knowledge. It's just not in use. To move forward, we've got to align our education with 21st century science. And the thing is, we know we can, we see it happening in different places, but that's really where we sit right now, is trying to move into putting those things into action. So we do use the word dyslexia. That's another question that often arises, even though specific learning disability is, as I said, a classification for individuals who may receive services in special education. It's oftentimes shows up also when someone does an assessment, but dyslexia is a term that folks can associate with this reading difficulty and have an understanding of. It took us years in our own household to realize that all of the paperwork was telling us that's dyslexia. We kept asking, is that dyslexia? And no one put those pieces together. So yes, we say dyslexia. And it's specific with a highly relevant and explanatory meaning. So that's why we use it. Science provides a definition for the unexpected challenges with a cognitive neurobiological basis. So it does have meaning to use that term. And it helps our individuals who have dyslexia. So goals of early screening. Why do we want folks to jump on board in all the places that we can? We want to be able to reach children at risk for dyslexia as early as possible when their reading intervention is maximally effective before students fall further and further behind. And we can actually do a lot of great things in preschool, and we can do a lot of things even before a student reaches preschool if a parent has been brought along on this and can help, even in speech, just the way the parent talks with the child. If we know that dyslexia is part of the family history, then we can start doing those things right away. And it's called a preventative or inoculation that we can provide in a history where there are reading difficulties. So for example, I have family members who have had children and there's dyslexia within that family history. We've provided some strong phonemic awareness exercises. Parents are able to do those early on, and those kiddos have moved right along, progressed, because the parents have known what to do. When they run into something where they say, hey, we're having a real challenge here, we have conversation, provide some activities. It's so powerful. We don't see it happening often enough because the information isn't reaching the parents. Early on is when that slope for learning is greatest and best to identify at-risk students and provide intervention. This is long before the wait to fail model. The students haven't done anything to signify failure. All we're doing here is providing the skill sets that we know are going to be vital and important to reading. And that's what we're providing in those early stages. Don't wait is the message. With time, the slope for learning flattens and improvement in reading is much slower. And I can verify from personal experience with that husband of mine that in that day when he was attempting to read that book, I spent years finding appropriate intervention to help not just my husband, but my children. My husband is a fantastic reader today, reads well above a college level, could have used that skill earlier in his life, but it came at a great cost. It was a great deal of time and effort to get that done. What's available for early screening for dyslexia? I have 3 here. There are many, but I have 3 top that I'm just going to mention. If there's interest, the developers of the top 2, the Pearl D and the Early Birds, they are more than happy to come and speak for a few minutes to the group about those specific screeners. I invited them this morning. They're both very busy. One is Dr. Nadine Gabb. She's with Harvard. And Dr. Nadine Gabb has developed the Early Birds, and that can go as low as 4 years old. It's online. It can be on an iPad. And when I talked to Dr. Gabb, it's been in education settings. It started in Boston, and it's been used in educational settings. But Dr. Gabb has also been piloting with doctors' offices, pediatric services, and it's been on an iPad. Takes about 5 minutes tops. That includes scoring. And they're able to give a definitive answer to a parent about, is my child showing signs of maybe struggling with components of reading? And they can provide those answers right there in 5 minutes on an iPad. The other piece is with that one, because then the next step is, well, now you've identified, red flagged, what are my interventions? And that's been a big gap because, as I say, the education, we've just been moving into the education system to really get the pieces in place and training for teachers. There's a real gap in services to be provided. Early Birds provides additional activities through that same software and on that iPad that the parent can then have their child engage with in order to improve those skills that are necessary for reading. The Pearl D that's listed first, that's kindergarten so far. They're trying to work it into lower spaces, but it's actually developed for pediatric settings. And it's about a 5-minute screener as well. It can be done on paper, so you don't need to have an iPad. And it's a quick assessment with a few items and you don't need to have heavy training to do a Pearl D, to provide a Pearl D. But that also will be a quick red flag for someone. The Pearl D doesn't come with interventions though. So that's the piece that Early Birds provides, that if a parent says, but what do I do next? And they would like interventions. The last one is the Shaywitz screener. Dr. Sally Shaywitz is phenomenal. I've quoted her many times throughout the presentation already. She is synonymous with dyslexia education. The Shaywitz screener is great, but it really is meant for educational settings. I place it here though, because a lot of parents may start asking about it because I'm seeing it being used more often in educational settings. And maybe in those medical pediatric settings, somebody might bring up, well, I've heard about the Shaywitz screener. And it is for educational settings. Again, it's a very good screener. It takes no more than about 20 minutes. That one takes more than about 20. It's K through 3. And it also has a bit of a family history piece to it as well. It's really designed, though, to move in then to intervention in a school setting to provide some feedback for educators in order to do that. Those are those top 3 that I'm seeing as screeners in that early space. But do you need a screener? No. So a lot of times just you can spot things and then, use a screener if you'd like. But what if I'm just noticing things? So how do we spot dyslexia? If you have a family member with reading difficulty, so that should be a common question. That's on the Pearl D. They're saying we should be commonly asking in pediatric settings too. Did anyone struggle with reading when they have small children? Because dyslexia is highly genetic and runs in families. A child with one parent with dyslexia has a 30 to 50% chance of inheriting it. That's high. Then phonemic awareness deficit. So I'm going to talk about the 2 number 1 things that we see occurring with dyslexia that we can spot. Number 1 is that phonemic awareness deficit. So that's the underpinning of learning to read. It's the ability to be aware of and think about the individual speech sounds or the phonemes in spoken language. K through 1, phonemic proficiency should emerge, which is phoneme analysis skills that are instant and automatic. What does this look like? If I were to say the word cat to a student and then say to the student, so cat, what are the sounds in cat? Let's count them together. What are they? K, a, t. I should be able to segment or break that apart. K, a, t. If I demonstrate this for a student, we should be able to do a couple of activities with just a 3-sound word and be able to pull them out. If they can't do that, I can break it down to 2. The word at. In at, how many sounds are there? 2 sounds, at, let's count them, at, and be able to segment or break those sounds apart. Likewise, they're going to need to go back and be able to blend them together. That skill set's highly important for students who are going to go on to reading. And then there are other skills that we do as well with recognizing sound, but you'd be very surprised to find that there are individuals, because for those who don't have a phonemic awareness deficit, this seems very easy, relatively mundane. But I have students who are in their 50s, 40s, 30s, speak English, no other language. This is the only language they've ever spoken, attempting to read for all of those years, never able to crack that code. And doing that exercise is very difficult. So that's it. The interesting piece is it will become readily identifiable. Rapid automatized naming is the second top one we're looking for. And that's the ability of someone to be able to rapidly and automatically name tasks of things that they know. It's a simple assessment that even the children can perform. And a RAND task consists of just an array of those familiar objects, colors, letters, numbers. They're each repeated several times, and the child's just asked to name them as quickly as possible. What this is driving at is the information that I already have available to me. How quickly and readily can I access it? It's part of processing. And that's going to be a key piece to dyslexia. So if you have a student who has double deficit dyslexia, they have a deficit with both. Oftentimes, in the majority of students we see, they have a deficit with phonemic awareness. But yes, there is a double deficit, and there can be RAN, rapid automatized naming, when the phonemic awareness comes along pretty well, but you still have a processing challenge. So that's some of those things to spot early. Spoken language issues, not always, but there can be word retrieval challenges, delayed speech, missing syllables or mispronunciation of speech sounds in a syllable. So somebody says hamburger and they're saying hand-erger, and they're missing pieces of it, and that continues on. You can pick up that pretty quickly. Problems reading, so there's difficulty learning the letters, letter sounds, sounding out words. I drilled the alphabet with both of my children with dyslexia for years, and they could not get it down. And I remember having home visits from the preschool. There was a program that was paid for by the federal government where they would come in and they would do a home visit for students who were struggling in preschool. And I remember that teacher coming in and saying, you really need to be going over the alphabet. And I wanted to cry. I'd been doing the alphabet for a solid year. We had the alphabet plastered all over the walls of my child's room. There was another reason why that alphabet wasn't laying down, but that information was vital. The information I could provide to say, that's been a year. I've been drilling this. I've been trying. That's all very important information. So the student may say reading is boring too as they get older. They're going to say, oh, reading is so boring. So beyond having those difficulties when they were younger and picking out those letters and sounds and putting them together, those older students are going to say, I can't stand reading. It's so boring. Those are really important key words, because if you do have the skill set for it, it's not boring. You can do the task. The other thing is they call themselves slow readers. That was the tag my husband put on himself. He said we called ourselves a household of slow readers. Well, we all had dyslexia. So look for those tags or names. If the student is now 10, 11 years old, and you hear the student or the parent talking about, so how's school going? What's reading looking like? And these are the kinds of information that you're receiving, then we need to look at reading, because there's a reason why. There isn't just a clinical diagnosis for slow reading, right? There are issues, there are challenges with reading, making it slow, making it difficult. So there can be problems with writing. Handwriting may be illegible, and their name may contain upper and lowercase letters throughout. So that's a really good sign. Once that student hits the norms of kindergarten and you start forming the letters to do your name, by the time you're in first grade, just by sheer peers sitting around you watching how you form your name, if there's a student who consistently is still uppercase with lowercase letters, there's a challenge there with the alphabetic system and the alphabetic principle that we need to get right on. And it's also indicating something to us. As they're older children to adults, again, you may have older students who have never been diagnosed, and the parents may be giving you indicators about this child is really struggling with reading and it's never been recognized. So as we get older, the spelling difficulties may look like this. You're going to struggle with the spelling of their own name. If they've got that down, the middle name. Once I bring that out for an older student, I say, well, how about your middle name? Could you write that for me? That's difficult because they don't use it nearly as often. The home address. These are students who will not be able to give you their home address or spell it correctly. The numbers might be jumbled. Their own birthday month. So if it's February and that's their own birthday month, they're going to miss the R in February and it could be misspelled, or it's going to take them a long time to do it. They should be able to do this automatically. How long have we been seeing it and doing it? This is dyslexia. Days of the week in order and spelled correctly. So this is a quick assessment that I give. It's one from Susan Barton. If you go through the days of the week, Monday through Sunday, can you list those in order and are they spelled correctly? Yeah, I'm going to find that very quickly, as well as months of the year. Can you give me all 12? Can we spell them correctly? Are they in order? So it's the order of things as well in language. Reading difficulties. They're going to self-describe as that slow reader. It's going to be error-prone reading. They're missing small common words, which is interesting. That's a piece of dyslexia. Comprehension is clearly diminished because of it, and they're very reluctant to read aloud. No one wants to read aloud when it's that difficult. The attention difficulties, they're going to tire quickly in the classroom. So now as you see, we're putting a constellation of things together here for a profile. They tire quickly in the classroom. Why? Because everything in there is difficult. They're vulnerable to loud noises because they're on edge. They act out in the class. Otherwise, great kid, I don't know why, such trouble in this particular class. And it's usually in classes where it's weighted with reading and writing tasks. So you'll hear, oh, they're great in my class where we're gym. They're great in my class where we're auto mechanics. But they're not great in my class where we're doing a lot of reading and writing. Then we lead into the behavioral and the emotional toll that this takes. The emotions may be well on the surface for this student. Otherwise, they seem just fine in other settings, but they seem ready to be reduced to tears in certain classrooms, in certain settings. They may be considered with a short fuse, but it's usually surrounded around these various things they have to do. And they may start to term themselves, and this starts very young, I'm not smart. And as my husband has said many times, by first grade, he was calling himself stupid. And so that's the really big toll. The issue that I have with just looking at the performance, we tend to focus a lot there, but I don't hear a lot of folks talking about this self-esteem, anxiety, social, emotional toll that dyslexia takes, and it's lifelong. And it starts young. As I said, my husband started to see himself as not smart in the first grade. That has hung on. So even though he understands dyslexia very well, he's had excellent intervention. I'm married to someone who is extremely bright, who still doesn't see himself that way and can be reduced to tears in talking about his reading experience. That's lifelong. And we really want to avoid that because as we learned before in the 21st century, we know what to do. So how do we do this? And this is just quickly just to let you know, I know none of you are going to be interventionists or interested in doing reading intervention, but there are key pieces that you need to be aware of because things are changing in the reading world. So teaching reading is rocket science. That's Dr. Louisa Moats, and she's one of our foremost researchers in reading. She is one of the writers of Letters Training Program, which we're doing in the state of Utah and across the country. Many are participating in it. But that's the message we want to get across is teaching reading isn't easy, and you do have to know a lot, and it's ongoing training, and there's a great deal to it. And it's just like rocket science, as Dr. Louisa Moats said. So the science of reading, what is it? And that, as I said, is coming back to understanding that we understand a great deal about how to teach reading. We just haven't been teaching our educators, and they haven't been receiving the ongoing training that they need. But what it is it's a body of work referred to as the science of reading. It's not an ideology, a philosophy, or a political agenda, or a one-size-fits-all approach. It's not even a program of instruction or a specific component of instruction. It is the emerging consensus from many related disciplines based on literally thousands of studies supported by hundreds of millions of research dollars. I'm not kidding you, it's huge. Conducted across the world in many languages. All of these studies have revealed a great deal about how we learn to read, what goes wrong when students don't learn, and what kind of instruction is most likely to work the best for the most students. That's the science of reading that we have available to us. Utah, thankfully, is one of many states getting on board. We have a bill called the Utah Early Literacy Outcomes Improvement Bill, and it was signed in a few years ago now. It's called Utah SB 127. There's a link there to look it up. Long and short, though, I've attached the fiscal note. It's a huge financial commitment that the state has made to turning around reading in the state of Utah. And it's going to take everybody at every level to really turn this around. And involved in this early literacy outcomes, it's for K through 3 now. They want to expand it to reach up into the upper grades of students who have already moved through those lower grades without receiving the help they need. But it's in K through 3 now. It's a commitment to train educators in the science of reading, provide help in finding curriculum and sorting through curriculum that is aligned with the science of reading, to provide time and opportunity to have educators do intervention for students who need additional instruction, not just in their classroom. And there should always be a component of screening and finding students who are struggling with reading because they need the additional help. So that's all involved in that early literacy. What's involved in the science of reading, just to quickly, you'll hear buzzwords, just so you know a few of them. And if you're ever talking with a parent who says, but I don't know what's the right instruction for my student, I hear at school one thing, I'm not sure they're doing the right thing. We should be talking about some of these components of the science of reading that come out of the research. And one is kind of a simple view of reading. This may change over time as we have better information, but the simple view of reading simply says, as you look down at the chart, that good reading comes from a few things. And if you notice, there's a multiplication symbol between word recognition or decoding. That's that D is, the big D is for decoding, word recognition, times comprehension, which is oral language comprehension as well. When you times those two together, you get reading comprehension. You end up where you want to be with excellent reading comprehension. That multiplication is important because you can't have poor word decoding and get to excellent language comprehension to get to good reading. Likewise, you can't have good decoding without oral language comprehension to get to good reading comprehension. We need everything working in order to get to excellent reading comprehension. So we need to have the tools to look for that. We should be teaching using much of the research and a background on Scarborough's reading rope. Basically, what that does is just reminds us that we have on the bottom strand of the rope, that's word recognition or decoding. That's where dyslexia really falls down for a student right there early on when we're looking at phonological awareness to get to good decoding and spelling with sight word recognition. All of those pieces hinge on those skills that we talked about earlier with a student with dyslexia who will struggle with those pieces. That then leads to that ability to do that leads to those upper language comprehension strands where we have excellent background knowledge. You're not gaining any if you're not reading. Vocabulary knowledge, I'm not using those words in context, how am I laying them down? Language structures, if I'm unable to get through a sentence without really struggling with the decoding of each word, how do I even get to the structure? Verbal reasoning and literacy knowledge that also come. If we have all of those components together, we end up with a really strong rope, that reading rope that has all those pieces, upper and lower strands of the rope. And that's part of the science of reading that we understand. And so what do we need? Great evidence-based instruction. This is all from the National Reading Panel and backed up by research. So it starts with that basic component of alphabetics, that phonemic awareness skill, phonics skills with systematic and explicit instruction in how to do these things, reading fluency, vocabulary, and reading comprehension. Those are all those key components. So if a parent asks, what's the best instruction? National Reading Panel, what do we go back to? Alphabetics, phonemic awareness in those foundations. And then I've just included some of the best books, blogs, and websites. And the resource list with a link is one that I've put together with the most recent research on early screening and intervention. And then there's also a link to some of our researchers who are looking into the correlation between ADHD and dyslexia. That's been a hot topic now for a few years, and pulling that information apart has been difficult. But the co-occurrence or comorbidity with ADHD and dyslexia that we're looking at now in some of the research, and that's going to be Dr. Fumiko Heft. She's another individual that would be happy to speak to the group if you have interest in those specifics, but she's looking at numbers as high as 60 to 70% in some of the research she's done. They've given it a wide berth from 30 to 70%. You'll see some of the research. So that is one that they're still looking at, but it has a high comorbidity with dyslexia. But those are just some of the resources.
Wow.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. This is really, really fascinating. So somebody put in the chat how grateful she was to have you be sharing this and that we're at this point. So yeah, it is really awesome. I agree. She taught kindergarten for years and wishes that you could teach every parent and educator this priceless lesson. Really, really interesting. I have a few questions, but before we get to mine, does anybody else have some questions or comments they'd like to share? Yeah.
Can I, oh, sorry, Ashley, you go first and then I'll pop in. I raised my hand, but I don't know that it's noticeable. So go ahead.
Okay. I just want to say thank you. I was diagnosed with dyslexia, ADHD, and I forget what the term is when you have numerical dyslexia.
Dyscalculia.
Yes. So I was diagnosed with those at 22.
Yeah.
And it like, as soon as I got it, I was like, oh my gosh, this all makes so much sense. So I love and I appreciate this. And it's really great to see how far things have come, even from when I was 22. So yeah. Thank you for this.
You bet.
I appreciate this. I mean, Ashley, I was going to say, I always said I was the dumbest kid in the smart math class. So I was always the kid bringing the curve down because I had kind of that dyscalculia type of a thing that I would transpose numbers. I could do the functions and all of the rest of it, but I would transpose numbers. And because it was an advanced math class, my instructors never caught it. They never saw anything. I was no idea why I was failing. And I was always, pulling like a, D+ in, these advanced math classes, but I was too bright to be in just like regular 10th grade math or 11th grade math. And it was always like instructors weren't catching that. Going back to the reading side of things, though, I know that there's always some in vogue way to teach reading. So I know for a long time, and my oldest child is 31 and my youngest is 24, but I think for a while there, they almost weren't teaching like phonetic reading. It was like word recognition or just something like that for a while. And I think my daughter really struggled for a long time with reading because of that. I think in that 7-year difference between my son and my daughter, he grasped it. My daughter really struggled because of the way they were teaching it in that time frame. And, I'm fluent speaking Spanish. Spanish is great because the way it's spelled, most of the times how you pronounce it. In English, that's a tough language. And so I think when you combine dyslexia with a tough language like English, that you have to know some sight words, and then other things you have to be able to pronounce phonetically, you really have to find a good way to, present that.
Yeah.
So I mean, just kind of, rambling observation there, but looking at the differences between a 7-year span on my 3 children was just really tricky. And even now, she's working on a degree in special education, but it's been a struggle her whole life to really sometimes read for rhetoric and really understand.
Yeah.
And I think it goes all the way back to that, like kindergarten and first grade type stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Really appreciate your comments. And you are right. So I was trying to avoid any controversy because it has been very controversial. We called it the reading wars. But yes, we abandoned what we knew about how to teach reading, and we went to this thing called whole language. And it really was literally teaching whole words and removing the whole sound component that is the foundation of teaching reading. And we're having to shift back to, let's go back to the science. But it's been very challenging because there are folks who want to hang on to what they've known. And this idea that you just put kids around books and they'll get it. They'll somehow get it. When they were around rich language environments. A lot of that was that rhetoric that was from that era, and really getting into the nitty-gritty of how to teach a student takes a lot of training and takes a lot of knowing, and it takes ongoing training. And a lot of folks don't want to do that heavy lifting. It is heavy lifting to do it that way. It was very interesting you talking about your math experience. There's a fantastic researcher out of France. His name is Stanislas Dehaene, or Twan, however you want to say his last name. He has a book called The Number Sense. I bet you would find it fascinating because he discusses how those lower orders with the dyscalculia is that just even putting the name of ONE to a number 1 can be challenging when you can do very higher order of math if the language component isn't there. It's a very interesting book talking about that, so that you'd find that interesting. I appreciated your comments.
Thank you.
Okay, my brain is just like, oh my gosh. Several questions, several thoughts, couple of thoughts really fast. An interesting comment just came up from Southwest Children's Clinic. For me personally, I think teachers always blame the reading issues due to being in a bilingual family. Oh, that's interesting. Right. Oh, our teachers.
I could talk for days on that one.
Our teachers need so much support. There's such a there's so many links in this chain, right? So I think part of what our goal is here today is to think about what this group of folks can take away and help families with. So I want to keep that goal in mind. But some of the things that I'm thinking about are, of course, the outcomes. When you've got a kid who from a very early age is feeling dumb, and no one is telling them otherwise and helping them. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that component, what's really interesting is if you want to talk about survivor, a kid who shows up to first grade every day when they're not getting it and no one's providing the kind of support that they need and trying to fake your way through it in first grade already, that's a survivor to me. I mean, it's extraordinary what we put children through.
Yep.
Who show up every single day, right? Needing better instruction and no fault of their own. And the problem is they're very aware. They're very aware that the kid next to them doesn't seem to be having the same struggle. I seem to be just like the other kid next to me. My husband said, I knew quickly, I assessed the whole room and I knew immediately where I was at in that room, first grade. And he said, preschool, I'd been fantastic. I could build. I was very handy with my hands. I was on top. We moved into first grade. They introduced those letters. And he said, I was immediately at the back of the room within the first week. And he said, and then after the first week, I was out in the hall. And they were saying that somebody would get to me because I wasn't getting it. And he said, and I spent first, second, and third grade out in the hall. That's where I spent my first, second, and third grade. And by third grade, he said, I knew it was over. I was never back in a classroom again. And that just, those outcomes should not happen. And the thing is, we know what to do about them. So the earlier we get in and identify, it's all critical and key is getting in early and identifying. We don't need to wait for students to fail. Like I said, there's certain things that we can see a student doing. We also, that family history is critical. So asking those important questions about what was reading like for other members of your family, that's really important to know. You make it a safe space by saying, we know that reading is heritable, right? There are components to reading. So we know that if there was a challenge for someone else, more than likely there may be a challenge for a loved one. And we put it in that, frame it up as you can help somebody else. And so when they're able to provide information that's helping another family member, I find they just open right up because they know, I don't want this happening to somebody else. It was terrible for me. Yeah.
Gosh. Okay. Oh my gosh. All right. So a couple of the things that that I'd like to kind of point out or ask for the group. And Ashley, do you want to say something? Go ahead before me.
I have a quick question. I'm just curious what the research shows in terms of children that have dyslexia, and you explain the situation very well. Are there behavioral issues in the classroom?
Yes.
And is there any, in Utah specifically, in our screening system, if children are having behavioral issues in the classroom, are they screened for things like dyslexia?
No. I can tell you that, no. And in fact, many of the educational settings that I stepped into, that was one of the first things I did is implement a system where if we have behavioral issues, can we just do a basic reading screener? Can we just do some of those basic screeners to see? And just in our setting, just colloquially, because we weren't part of a larger study, but just in our setting, we'd screen out maybe 5 kids in a week that had behavioral issues, and 3 out of the 5, it was our majority, had some form of a learning disability with reading that was never identified. The kid was struggling academically. It became so important that at least while I was there with those specific administrators, they said, why weren't we doing this before? This is a great idea. Why weren't we looking at this before? So it's interesting that it makes good common sense as well, but I don't see it carrying over. It has to be reintroduced, it seems. And that's part of the legislation, is trying to get more information in the hands of administrators as well as teachers to make better decisions around, just like you're saying, if we see behavior, have we done these other pieces too? And the more educated we are around these things, it seems to be we make better decisions.
Yes, Natalie.
So would schools, who would be the right person to, if I'm working with a child and I need this to happen, do I ask them to see the reading specialist? Like, what's the right words? Give me some verbiage.
Yeah, you bet. So in the state of Utah, we have, and I think it's one of my links in there, the Utah Dyslexia Handbook. So we actually have a handbook for the state of Utah, which is fantastic. And it's online. So you can just Google the Utah Dyslexia Handbook. And there's actually in the front of it, in the table of contents, it says, if I'm an educator, what do I say? You can use a lot of the same wording about what do I say to a parent if I think their child has dyslexia. And you can use even the same wording to talk to a parent. But here's the challenge is the intervention gap. So, and I'm just going to address it. There is an intervention gap. We have now better information about the challenges. We may have better information about finding and screening, and we have good information in the hands of a lot of parents who are now sharing information amongst each other and saying, hey, have you looked at dyslexia? This could be a reading challenge. And that's fantastic. But then what do I do next? If I have a student who's struggling with reading, where do I take them? Oftentimes you may go back to your local public school and they're just barely getting folks trained. And so they're not really equipped to provide the best instruction. So right now, what I'm saying in the state of Utah, one day I hope that I say, yep, your school's fantastic, a great resource. But right now I'm saying I'd check in with Decoding Dyslexia Utah for resources right now. So they have lists of individuals who are properly trained in how you work with students who are struggling with reading. And I right now, I think that's my best list, because depending on where you live may be your resources. Park City has done a fantastic job with PC Reads. That's an individual I work with. She's on the Utah Literacy Coalition. They've done a great job, and it's come at a great deal of private expense. They've invested in those schools up there. So there are some great educators within the school system that you could walk right over to the school and have this conversation, and you'd be talking with someone who's got a lot of training. That's not going to happen everywhere, unfortunately.
That was definitely one of my questions. So we don't have a perfect answer right now.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I'm thrilled that legislation and money are going to be helping with this. Like in the state of Utah, to hear that that's happened, that means there were some very persistent, patient
one of them
up on the hill.
It's taken a lot of work.
A lot of work.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's kind of an oxymoron to say that the Utah legislature has passed good. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Off my soapbox, but that's huge. That's huge. So that will mean some things will start happening, but probably not equally across the board or at the same time across the board. So that means that parents have to be advocates, and we have to help them in any way we can. So then another question that I have is about, do our folks on this call have the capacity to do yet another screener? And I would be very curious to hear what folks have to say about this idea. I really appreciated, Donell, you saying that the Pearl D, or the early bird only takes 5 minutes. Sometimes we don't have that 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So does anyone have any comments on that?
I'm going to comment. Probably everybody on this call knows ad nauseum that my ex-wife is an elementary school principal in Jordan School District. And she has the best interests of every single kid in her school at heart. But I know that ability, and she was a first grade teacher for years. So, that ability to have all these eager young minds, and she had amazing classroom management and worked with all sorts of kids in the classroom. But I don't know that they screened for that. I don't know that they had the ability to do that. And, we always look, kids in IEPs, we look for least restrictive environment for keeping the kids in the classroom and the interventions. But, when you're one teacher and 30 kids in a classroom or whatever, I sometimes think, I don't know how you do it. Like, I don't think I could manage 30 kids, let alone figuring out, who has some of those issues. And so I think so much of it has to fall on parents trying to recognize too. And we live in a different environment. I grew up in a household where up until I was 13 or 14, my mom was home. And so she read with us in the morning. She made us read to her in the morning, and, would have known if we had some reading deficits. But I don't know that kids get that as much anymore. I know it's quite often in my ex-wife's classroom, we're told, please read every night with your kids. Please sign off that you've read with your kids. But I don't know how much that happens. We have latchkey kids are on their phones and playing, PlayStation all the time. I don't know that happens. And so I think, we talk about the schools being responsible, but there's also some parent responsibility there too. And parents don't know what they don't know too. And that's part of it as well. So, because there were some really good comments in here from Alyssa. Alyssa Feifeld said, We found out my daughter has dyslexia. She tried to avoid school every day. I've noticed that she's also pulled from class for reading. And because of that, she comes home with so much more homework in other areas. So you get slammed there as well. So I think it's a really tricky situation, what's this parent school partnership, and the parents, I've really found too that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Parents have to push really hard to get stuff. Okay, let's figure out what's going on with my kid. And if you're not one of those sort of parents, sometimes stuff doesn't get done.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's tough.
Excellent comments. Those are all excellent comments. And I think that's why you see now moving towards pushing earlier into the space, because you're right, it becomes so much harder. Not only is the intervention more difficult because not only do we pick up habits and various things, it's easier to teach and train, but you also have more obligations on that student's time, right? So even past third grade, the things that the student is expected to do within the classroom are not related to learning to read at all. And so you are taking time from other things for a student, right? And so getting into those earlier spaces, I think that's why they're pushing earlier and earlier. How quickly can we identify? How early can we identify getting into that space? And then the intervention. So that's the other piece. I mean, Early Birds provides some intervention, but depending on where you live, so then where do I go? So you found out that my child has this deficit. I could be looking at a reading difficulty later down the road. Where do I go? What do I get? And these are a lot of the pieces we're trying to fill in as we go, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I had a feeling this was going to get a lot of discussion going. Maria.
I want to say, I agree with Eric so much. You don't know what you don't know. And most of my families here, it's so true what Eric said. And it's about early intervention. And so we're able to, and I love what Donell is saying, is we have to get in early. So we are able to identify, because of our experience or, knowledge or awareness, to then help the families to then get the child in the right, direction. And so it's such an amazing collaboration. So I just want to say, I love this. Thank you.
And Maria, I appreciate your comments as the mother, because even if someone had provided information like that to me about one of my children, I could have picked up a ball. Nobody handed me a ball, so I didn't even know there was a ball to pick up. But just that would have been helpful back in the day, is to have somebody in a space early on tell me, you know what, I'm seeing some things, because I didn't know. Like you said, I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, guys. Sorry, Carrie, hold on for just a second, because I saw your comment in the chat too. I just wanted to look back to what Alyssa put in the chat, that she found out that her daughter has dyslexia, and that her daughter tried to avoid school every day, and that was pulled from reading and has so much more homework as a result of that in other areas. I mean, yeah, and she wishes that the schools could help, and it's really tough, especially in Utah, especially with what's going on with parents and schools and libraries. And it's hard. It takes a village, right? And we're part of that village is what it comes down to. So Carrie, if you want to go ahead and talk and bring up what you put in the chat.
I don't know Donell, if you have any tips and suggestions, since some of us are working with, or all of us are working with families who may be looking for a diagnosis or resources or a place to refer families to. Like, you can put that in the notes as well, since we're almost out of time. But what does that process look like? How long does it take? Who are the people we should refer families to if we suspect there needs to be a diagnosis for this?
You bet. And Decoding Dyslexia Utah is my number one go-to source. They also have the individuals. So I'm just going to quickly introduce you, because this could be a whole other topic, to another kind of sticky widget for folks who end up in this category with, okay, I suspect dyslexia. In the state of Utah, the only people who can provide a diagnosis are trained psychologists who can give that diagnosis of dyslexia. So the school doesn't ever give a diagnosis of dyslexia. You may go to the school and say that I think my child is struggling with dyslexia. I'd like to know, and ask them to do some testing. Now, they're obligated, once you've made that request and put it in writing, right? And you're all aware of this, they're obligated to do some testing. Now, it depends on how well they're trained in the testing and what they're looking at and those sort of things. And that varies widely, as we've talked about. And then only then, if I do qualify, it's going to be on a qualification for special education out of one of those 13 categories. It'll be SLD. It's not a diagnosis. But if a parent really wants a diagnosis of dyslexia, that's on the parent to find the trained psychologist or neuropsychologist in the state who has a licensure to be able to give that diagnosis for dyslexia. And that is out of pocket, at least $1,500 to $2,000 from a parent. Out of pocket, insurance typically does not pay. I think it's been a long time since I've seen insurance pay for that. So that is an equity issue. What we're seeing are kids who have the resources that are getting a diagnosis in the state of Utah. I've never seen a child that doesn't have the resources that doesn't end up with a diagnosis of dyslexia. Likewise, I see a lot of students who don't have the resources, who have dyslexia, never get a diagnosis. So that's a whole other sticky widget of, so what do you do as a parent if you figure your child, might be struggling with dyslexia, that we really need to figure out a better way to do that for families in the state of Utah.
Definitely. We have some information on the medical home portal around specific learning disabilities, and we will make sure to add the Decoding Dyslexia Utah in terms of a resource there. And we'll make sure that that goes out in the notes. And I'm going to look through all of, if I can get your PowerPoint, Donell, I'll look through all of that and make sure that that stuff is easily pulled out when we send our meeting summary as well. But of course, this is all recorded too, and I'm sure Donell's slides can be made available as well. So we'll do all of that. The other thing that I was hoping to point out, and we've run out of time, and I think that's just fine, is of course the link with ADHD. And so I think I would be curious, but we won't go down that path right now. I would be curious to know from folks who are seeing kids in their practice that are, are you seeing the reading issues and then linking it potentially to ADHD, or are you seeing the ADHD symptoms and then potentially linking it back to include dyslexia? I would be really curious, but again, we don't have time right now for that. I want, before we let anyone go, thank you for everyone putting so many great things in the chat. We will cull those and make sure stuff goes out in the meeting summary. I just want to give one moment to Ashley about the two webinars echoes that she mentioned that have to do with USU's Institute for Disability Research, Policy and Practice, formerly known as, I can't even remember what they were formerly known as. Ashley, do you want to talk for just a second?
Sure, I'll be
Center for
extremely
Persons
brief.
with Disability. Yeah.
Thank you.
So the first one, they did a survey, and they will be doing a webinar to discuss the results of the survey and provide recommendations. So that's what that first one is. The second one is an actual ECHO series, and it is for mental health providers as well as disability providers and really anyone. And it's going to be just the regular old ECHO series where they have a 90 minutes presentation, case presentation, and then interdisciplinary discussion. And that starts May 15th.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay. They do a great job up there as well. So we'll make sure that those links go out too. Oh my gosh, it's 10 o'clock. Can you believe it? This was really fantastic. Donell, thank you so much. Yeah, we will be following up on this. We will be getting information out, and we will be updating the medical home portal appropriately. And gosh, I kind of feel like we'll be asking Donell to come back. So,
and Mindy, like I said, if you want additional information, Dr. Nadine Gabb with Harvard said, I would love to come. I just couldn't come this time. So maybe in the future, she fills in a piece.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm thinking. So really lovely. Okay. You guys, you got to go to your other parts of your day now. Sorry. Thanks everyone so much. Have a great Wednesday. Bye-bye.